Severe tropical cyclone Narelle continues to strengthen this afternoon and is now a powerful tropical cyclone with a significant threat to parts of far northern Queensland, particularly north of Cooktown up to Lockhart River. I'm going to have all the latest information here based off what we're expecting this system to do when it makes landfall on Queensland, what you need to do to ensure that you're fully prepared for this system, how much rainfall, how much wind, and how much storm surge your location can expect, plus the long-range track and intensity prospects of tropical cyclone Narelle, because she's not going to stop at Queensland. She could impact the Northern Territory and Western Australia as well. My name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and if you're brand new to my channel, please do consider subscribing. A massive thank you to all of the recent subscribers. But let's get stuck straight into the current situation by looking at tropical cyclone Narelle here on the satellite imagery. It's out here in the Coral Sea. It's still about 1,000 kilometers away from the Queensland coastline, but it's got deep convection and thunderstorm activity developing around the storm's center of circulation. This is a surefire sign that this system is intensifying quickly in a favorable environment on approach to Queensland, and it's warranted a Category 5 landfall upgrade from the Bureau of Meteorology. They now expect this system to approach the Queensland coast and potentially cross the Queensland coast as an incredibly powerful Category 5 strength tropical cyclone. This hasn't happened in Queensland in 11 years now, since Tropical Cyclone Marcia did it back in 2015. It's debatable whether Debbie was a Category 5 or not, but this system here likely to come ashore as an incredibly powerful tropical cyclone, producing wind gusts in excess of 250 kilometers an hour around the landfall site. The storm's track and intensity prospects are more or less locked in. On the intensity side of things, we still need to see how this system develops in the next couple of hours to really get an idea of whether or not this is going to come ashore as a Category 5, if it's going to even reach Category 5 status or not. But in terms of the track, it is pretty much locked in at this point in time. It's a small tropical cyclone, so impacts are not going to extend too far away from the storm center. The general west-southwestward motion will tend more towards the west through tomorrow morning into tomorrow afternoon, crossing the coast around Melville Island and then going inland around the Cohen area through early Friday morning and into early Friday afternoon, where it will then cross the Cape York Peninsula out into the Gulf of Carpentaria late Friday night into early Saturday morning. So it's about 2 days away from landfall, give or take, probably a little bit less than that now. I'd say probably around 40 to 42 hours away from crossing the coast around Cohen, likely as an incredibly powerful tropical cyclone with some very significant wind gusts within it. This is a look at the precipitation forecast here. Those reds and purple colorings indicate intense precipitation. Yellows and oranges indicate that moderate precipitation. Blues and greens indicate light precipitation. You can see those more intense colorings getting closer to the Queensland coastline through tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. And whilst showers and storms are expected to begin piping up throughout tonight and into early tomorrow morning, some of them will be quite gusty at times, particularly for the Daintree rainforest. We'll talk about the impacts there in just a second. The really severe stuff is not going to come ashore until later tomorrow afternoon, particularly for our northernmost locations, which are a little bit further off towards the west. And where this tropical cyclone is going, it means that those areas are going to favour those significant impacts later tomorrow night and into early Friday morning, as opposed to areas around Cooktown, which will actually see some of the strongest winds initially before winds begin to pick up further towards the north and the west. So Thursday night is when conditions are expected to get really dicey north of Cooktown. So places like Lizard Island, Cape Melville and Cohen, there's not a lot of people up here. There's a whole lot of nothing up in this part of Queensland, but they're expecting some really strong wind gusts through Thursday night, and then as this system begins approaching the Queensland coastline late Thursday night into early Friday morning, it's likely to intensify to Category 5 severe tropical cyclone status. That does not happen often, and a Category 5, that's as strong as they come. Those sort of storms, they mean business. They're not ones to be laughing about, cracking jokes about. They are serious weather systems, and they do end lives, Category 5 strength systems, so you need to make sure that you are protected and in your safe space and adequately prepared when this system does begin approaching, and that is a message to everyone in and around Cohen in far northern Queensland. Conditions are expected to get quite dicey there through Friday morning, and they will pick up really, really quickly. This is a small tropical cyclone moving through at a great rate of knots. It's got a forward motion of about 20 to 25 knots, nearly 35 kilometers an hour at times. So this system is going to be in and out very quickly, but it also means that it's going to go from, calm and settled to extremely windy in the space of about 15 minutes when the inner core begins coming ashore here. It will feel like a severe thunderstorm rolling through, just a very, very powerful severe thunderstorm. I mean, the silver lining to that is it's going to be in and out very quickly. I mean, we're probably looking at a 4 to 6 hour impact. Some tropical cyclones can last up to 24 hours in places, particularly if they are slow moving. So that's the good news here. Crossing the Cape York Peninsula through Friday and then emerging out into the Gulf of Carpentaria late Friday night into early Saturday morning, where further intensification is expected. If you've been paying attention to your neck of the woods, Daintree and Cassowary coasts expecting showers and thunderstorms heavy at times right through Thursday and then into Friday. They're really going to pick up through Thursday night for the Daintree rainforest. We're expecting locally intense accumulations Thursday into Friday up there. Rainfall is also going to be quite heavy at times through parts of the Cassowary Coast, but we're talking pretty much strictly coastal rainfall accumulations at this point in time, and they're going to be quite hit or miss because it's going to be coming through in the form of showers and thunderstorms, pretty hit or miss, whereas around the tropical cyclone landfall site, we're expecting a small but very solid swathe of 200 to 400 millimeters to occur. The heaviest rainfall will begin to ease off and pull out into the Gulf of Carpentaria through Friday afternoon, leaving places like Weipa and Oroken behind. We're still expecting locally moderate falls to continue around the Cassowary Coast and the Daintree rainforest as that monsoon trough expands out towards the east in the wake of this system, and that will persist through Saturday and then out towards early Sunday morning. Conditions should begin to ease as a bit of a cooler southeasterly flow replaces this more tropical air mass that's going to situate over far northern Queensland through Saturday night into Sunday morning. So the good news is conditions should ease up completely through Sunday. Still a couple of showers lingering here and there. We're still in the tropics, mind you, so rainfall is not going anywhere anytime soon, but we're talking about this rainfall beginning to ease up properly through Saturday night into early Sunday morning. That's good news for these areas likely to see some significant flooding as a result of this system. Let's briefly run through what we're expecting around the landfall site wind speed wise. I know that not a whole lot of people are up here. There's again like a whole lot of nothing up in this part of far northern Queensland, but some extremely dangerous wind gusts are expected. And keep in mind the forecast models, because of their poorer resolution in comparison to our convective allowing models, they tend to underestimate wind speeds on these ultra powerful tropical cyclones. So winds are actually going to get a whole lot stronger than the already mammoth numbers that we're seeing right now on the screen, 230 k's an hour in a few spots. Cohen is likely to see wind gusts approaching 200 kilometers an hour, potentially as much as 250 k's an hour, depending on how the system does make it ashore. It will likely be on a weakening trend as it makes landfall. Cohen is also a little bit more protected. We do have some mountains adjacent to the coastline that put the coast between Cohen. The mountains are situated between the coast and Cohen, and the system, again, likely on its way out at that point in time, means Cohen will be spared the worst of the storm's inner core. But places like Lizard Island and Cape Melville, again, I know there's a whole lot of nothing up here, but very significant wind gusts possible there. Lockhart River should see a brief period of destructive wind gusts early on Friday morning as the system does come through. Winds should ease Friday afternoon for Lockhart River, but gusts should remain around that 80 to 110 kilometer an hour mark during this tropical cyclone's landfall process. Winds will pick up on the southern side of the system. As we know, tropical cyclone is rotating clockwise in the southern hemisphere, so what we're going to be looking at is winds coming around on this sort of angle, which means that we've got the winds exposed to the coast and exposed to the Pacific Ocean on the southern side of this system, which means wind gusts for coastal areas are going to be at their strongest on the southern side. So you're talking about Cooktown, Hopevale, the Daintree rainforest, right down to the Cairns area. We're going to be talking about potentially damaging wind gusts, and we do actually have a cyclone watch extending south to just north of Cairns, excluding the Cairns metro, where we're looking at potentially gale force wind gusts, as is where the system approaches a coastline. The strongest winds are likely in this area through Thursday night into early Friday morning. Because of how soggy the ground is up in this part of far northern Queensland and how much rainfall is likely to come through, we are likely to see trees fall down, crops fail, for example. Homes and buildings should be fine. Again, the strongest winds that are posing a really big risk to homes and property are going to be concentrated in this storm's very small but powerful inner core, and that's expected to remain outside of the more densely populated areas along the Daintree coast and especially outside of the Cairns area. We've got about 200 k's of ground in between Cairns and the expected track of this tropical cyclone. So that's very good news indeed. We're not going to be seeing those extremely destructive wind gusts developing across the Daintree coast or into the Cairns area. Even less so, we're expecting these winds to impact areas along the Cassowary coast. So gusts may approach 80 or 90 kilometers an hour on the Cassowary coast. Same deal with Cairns, but for example, we're not looking at these high-end destructive wind gusts that are going to be associated with this tropical cyclone's inner core pushing into the Cassowary coast, unless we're talking about intense storm fronts coming through, which are just not expected at this point in time. So somewhat dicey on the Daintree coast. It could be quite windy Thursday night into Friday morning for some places, particularly around Cooktown. It could be quite exciting. Very dicey further north of Cooktown, but then Cairns and the Cassowary coast. This is going to be more or less a nothing burger on the wind front. The rainfall accumulations are expected to be quite significant from a weather system like this. We're looking at a swathe of very heavy rainfall accumulations around the landfall site, 400 millimeters most certainly on the cards at this point in time around the landfall site, which includes Cohen. Some life-threatening flash flooding and riverine flooding is expected around this area. Because this is going to be a small and intense tropical cyclone, this is all going to fall in a very short period of time, so expecting some very sharp river level rises around here. Lockhart River is a little bit further towards the north, so they're likely to be outside of the most intense rainfall accumulation bands from this system. Same deal with Weipa here, but we could still be looking at 100 to 150 millimeters of pop in both of those locations. Oroken as well could be looking at about 150 to 300 millimeters millimeters, depending on how strong this tropical cyclone is moving over the Cape York Peninsula, but it could still be quite wet and definitely quite windy for those areas as well. Rainfall accumulations, again, being on the southern side of this system, are expected to pick up for the Daintree coast. We're expecting widespread falls between 100 to 250 millimeters. In a few spots, traditionally wetter locations may see up to 350 or 400 millimeters, particularly the further north you go. So we're thinking about Beds, we're thinking about Yandal, for example, as some of our higher rainfall prone areas. Cooktown could also see about 200 millimeters of rainfall from this event here, up towards Cape Tribulation as well, 200 millimeters of rainfall further north towards Lizard Island and north of Hopevale. Rainfall accumulations through here could be approaching 250, 300, even 350 millimeters, depending on what sort of inner bands and banding features we see in those areas. Kansas is looking at 100 millimeters. It shouldn't get much wetter than about 150 mils in Kansas, but it only takes one rain train to move over the area, and especially because we're talking about rainfall coming through on Saturday and Sunday as well, rainfall accumulations could quickly get out of hand, particularly for the Cassowary coast, which is expected to be in the firing line of some of the heavier falls in the wake of this tropical cyclone in those areas. Traditionally, wetter spots on the Cassowary coast may pick up as much as 300 millimeters of rainfall. More widespread falls between 100 to 200 millimeters can be expected along the Cassowary coast. Rainfall accumulations into the tablelands and then out to Mount Garnett and north to Mount Carbine are likely to be between the 50 to 80 millimeter mark, increasing in places to about 150 millimeters the closer to the coastline you get. Rainfall accumulations will fall off a cliff south of the Hinchinbrook area, so places like Rollingstone and then down towards Townsville, not looking at more than about 20 millimeters or 30 millimeters at this point in time. Really minimal accumulations for those areas as a result of this tropical cyclone, but there could be some decent follow-up rainfall in a few spots, so we will keep, close tabs on that situation at this point in time. But yeah, definitely some very interesting times ahead on the impact side of things here with this tropical cyclone. One thing that does get overlooked, and particularly because this is impacting quite a remote area, is going to be our significant storm surge and wave height. We're looking at some very significant waves in the Princess Charlotte Bay. In a few spots, they may be approaching 8 meters when this tropical cyclone makes passage through. Significant wave heights out in the open ocean in a Category 5 can reach 12 to 15 meters at times. They can be extremely high. And a storm surge about 3 meters above the HAT can be expected. Again, that doesn't impact too many people in this area, but that could back up some of the rivers that are trying to release some of the water as this tropical cyclone moves through and makes its impact up in far north Queensland, makes itself feel known, that's for sure. Now, I've got two more things that I want to talk about. The first is the current satellite structure and what this system is going to do tonight in terms of intensification and movement. And then I want to look at the long-range forecast and some of the impacts we might be seeing for the Northern Territory and Western Australia. So let's just start things off by looking at the satellite imagery over here on the BOM satellite viewer. This is some kind of more sciencey, goggly-gook sort of satellite imagery once you start breaking it down, but it's pretty easy to understand once you understand it. Pretty easy to interpret once you understand it. So these yellow and then tending grey to white shadings indicate intense thunderstorm activity. In this little area here around the storm's expected eye wall, we're beginning to see some overshooting cloud tops in these areas. We see that in thunderstorms or severe thunderstorm development only in the strongest of severe thunderstorms. That indicates that we have a very strong and potent eye wall developing in this tropical cyclone. This massive expanse of yellow is called a central dense overcast. It's pretty typical to see cloud coverage of this intensity in the Coral Sea when we're talking about intensifying tropical cyclones at this time of the year, but it goes to show that this is a very powerful bunch of thunderstorms around this tropical cyclone. This is intensifying quickly, and it's got some very gusty and very strong winds around its center, along with some very heavy rainfall as well. We also have a little bit of a fracture towards the southern side of the system as well. You can see that the yellow shading is not as intense on the southern side of the eye, which I've just marked with that X. You can see it's a little bit shallower down there, and that's because we've got a bit of southerly or southeasterly wind shear beginning to get to this tropical cyclone. That may put the brakes on the intensification throughout the next couple of hours, but it's not likely to halt this storm in the long run. It was one of the reasons why I was doubtful in this system becoming a Category 4 or a Category 5, but the system's done really well in it so far, and considering it's actually going to be moving along with the wind shear in the next couple of days, it shouldn't be a problem for this tropical cyclone, but we will keep monitoring the situation. It may have a role to play in weakening the tropical cyclone just before landfall. Fingers crossed, but not looking overly likely at this point in time. And another band that I want to look at here on this imagery is the visible imagery, not so much for an analysis point of view, but just, wow, look at this. That's the point of view that we're looking at right now. South of PNG, this system is very defined, very strong indeed. And you can see as we roll this imagery back and forth, you can see that defined eye wall now beginning to develop, and that eye in the center of this convection really beginning to come out now in the last couple of hours. It has clouded over a little bit in the most recent satellite frames. That's a sign of intensification. Actually, that's a sign that these thunderstorms are continuing to overshoot and continuing to churn away. And with that convection getting deeper and deeper throughout the afternoon and now into the evening hours around Tropical Cyclone Narelle, that's a sign that the system has intentions to intensify intensify, and it is likely to climb to Category 4 status by early tomorrow morning. We could be waking up to an absolute behemoth out here in the Coral Sea, and that's not often I use wording similar to that. Tropical Cyclone Narelle really is going to be a very significant weather system, that's for sure. And over to our DeepMind forecast modelling right now. This is a look at the 18Z runs here from our experimental models, and also if we were to throw in all of the other forecast models as well and have a look at what we're talking about track-wise with this tropical cyclone's future, you can see that we've got a very clear-cut picture now that this system is going to eventually make a transcontinental journey. It's going to impact Queensland first as a powerful tropical cyclone, then go into the Northern Territory, and then eventually off towards Western Australia. Let's have a look at the system right now. The path is pretty much set in stone. I mean, we're looking at this sort of westerly or west-southwesterly motion in the next day or so, then tending westerly, even a bit of west-northwesterly in it before landfall up in far northern Queensland. Powerful system up there. Moving into the Gulf of Carpentaria, still generally heading out towards the west, where it's going to either skim or landfall on Groot Island as a powerful severe tropical cyclone late on Saturday. Moving through the Northern Territory, still really good track congruency. It's expected to move south of Darwin, but north of, pretty much north of the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, basically, laterally speaking. It's a very congruent path at this point in time. And then finally heading out into the Kimberley region in the early parts of next week after dropping a lot of rainfall into the Northern Territory, and then into the Indian Ocean properly, where intensification is then expected to occur as we head out towards Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday next week. There's also very good track consensus right now, a little bit less track consensus, but we've got some very solid track consensus in the fact that this tropical cyclone is going to head west and then begin moving in towards the southwest and recurving down almost parallel to the West Australian coastline. There has been a bit of an easterly shift in the current track, which puts the Pilbara coastline under a little bit more of a risk of seeing impacts and significant impacts from this tropical cyclone. But at this point in time, it is still pretty uncertain, and it's too early to say for sure whether this is going to go into Port Hedland or into Exmouth or remain out into the Indian Ocean before eventually recurving back in towards Perth. There's still a lot of factors at play here in the long-range forecast modelling, but it is becoming increasingly clear that the Queensland is going to receive a very hard blow from this on Friday morning. The Northern Territory is going to see a lot of rainfall from this weekend, and then Western Australia, at least some portion of Western Australia, is going to be significantly impacted rain and possibly wind-wise from this tropical cyclone as we head out towards the latter parts of next week. And the reason for that is our massive Central Australia high pressure ridge. This is a look at the upper level winds here over on Met Centre, and you can see a massive high pressure ridge situated in Central Australia right now. That is keeping these winds spinning, or in the tropical region spinning from east to west. That's guiding that tropical cyclone across northern Australia, and then where that ridge cuts off, which is basically along the West Australian coastline, that's where that tropical cyclone is going to be able to round down and then sink in towards central and then eventually off towards southwestern WA. And that is why this track has been so locked in and so confident over the last couple of days. Ever since that upper trough that we were expecting to drag the system down into the graveyard from the Coral Sea disintegrated, we've been locked in on this westerly track. And it's great to see that the DeepMind models have once again absolutely nailed the long-range forecast compared to our numerical forecast models, which did a pretty shoddy job for it earlier on last week. But yeah, definitely something to watch at this point in time. This is a significant tropical cyclone, and it's not going to be done with Queensland. We're talking about impacts through the Northern Territory and potentially off in towards Western Australia as well. Tropical Cyclone Narelle's marathon run continues out into the Coral Sea, and it is going to intensify substantially more in the next 24 hours on the run up towards landfall. If you've been enjoying the coverage so far, make sure you are subscribed to the CyclonesOZ channel. We've done 3 updates today just because of the massive intensification. We'll be back towards 2 updates tomorrow, and then on Friday we'll of course have that landfall update plus an evening update when the system moves over the Gulf of Carpentaria or into the Gulf of Carpentaria, and we'll be beginning to talk about what this system may mean for Darwin and then for places beyond that as well. So lots more coverage still to come on Tropical Cyclone Narelle. For your home of that, check out my Facebook page, and also make sure you're subscribed to me here on YouTube. But that'll be it for me this afternoon and this evening and for today. I'll catch you on the next storm. Goodbye.